Welcome to Playback with another episode of history. For centuries, just saying the word Viking brings up this one very specific, very brutal image, right? A figure of pure violence, a caricature of historical fact. But like any good mystery, the popular story, well, it's rarely the whole story. Today, we're opening the case file on the Vikings. And this is Exhibit A. This is the image we all know. It's the beginning of our mystery. It's a powerful picture for sure, but it's one that's absolutely full of missing evidence and some really surprising contradictions. So, which is it? Were they just this destructive force of legend? Or was there something much, much more happening behind all that steel and fire? To find the answer, we have to go right back to the beginning. Let's dive into this. Every great mystery has an inciting incident. That one single event that just sets the whole story in motion. For the Vikings, that moment was bloody, it was shocking, and it would define their reputation for 1,000 years. This is where the legend begins. The raid on this monastery, Lindisfarne, was unbelievably brutal and totally unexpected. It sent this wave of pure terror through Christian Europe. All of a sudden, these raiders from the north were the #1 threat, and this single event officially kicked off what we now call the Viking Age. But hold on, here's our first major clue, a piece of evidence that changes literally everything. The word Viking wasn't a name for a people or a nation, it was a job description. A Vikinger was just someone who went on an expedition. Now, what's really interesting is how this simple fact reframes the entire story. It shifts our focus from who they were to what they did, and maybe more importantly, why they did it. Okay, so to solve this mystery, we can't just stay in one place. We have to follow the evidence. And in this case, the evidence is that iconic Viking longship. We've got to track their movements to understand their true motives and their absolutely incredible reach. And when we follow them, you can see this clear evolution. They didn't just stick to simple smash-and-grab raids. Oh no, their ambitions grew. By 865, they weren't just raiding England, they were invading, with something called the Great Heathen Army, to conquer and to settle down. By 911, their leader Rollo was so formidable that the French king basically just gave him a huge piece of land. We know it as Normandy, literally the land of the Northmen. This wasn't just chaos, this was strategy. It was expansion. And this expansion, it was driven by these larger-than-life figures. You've got legendary raiders like Ragnar Lothbrok, you've got nation builders like Harald Fairhair, and then you have explorers like Leif Erikson, who reached North America almost 500 years before Columbus. And get this, while all this was happening in the West, other Norsemen, the Rus, were heading east, navigating the great rivers of Russia and laying the foundations for a future empire there. Okay, now we come to a crucial part of the investigation. We're about to uncover evidence that completely contradicts that whole savage barbarian narrative. See, if Vikings were only warriors, the archaeological record would be filled with little more than weapons. But what we actually find? Well, it tells a very, very different story. Every good investigator looks for physical evidence, right? Well, archaeologists have found some pretty compelling proof. Thousands of silver coins from the Abbasid Caliphate, that's in modern-day Baghdad, buried all across Scandinavia. This isn't the treasure of a simple raider, no way. This is the profit of a global merchant. And here's how they got that silver. They weren't just sailing west to raid, they were sailing east to trade. They set up major hubs on the rivers of Russia, basically becoming the northern gatekeepers of the Silk Road. We're talking about them trading goods from the Arctic for silks from China, acting as this vital connective tissue of the medieval world. So the crucial point here is their global reach. And the evidence for a more complex society just keeps piling up. They weren't lawless. They had a parliament, the Althing, to settle disputes. Their society was surprisingly egalitarian for the time. Women could own property and even initiate a divorce. They literally gave us the word law, not to mention words like sky and window. They founded cities we still know today, like Dublin. This is not the profile of a simple brute. And this brilliantly illustrates the complexity we've been uncovering. So, we've examined the scene of the crime, we've followed the leads, and we've uncovered some seriously contradictory evidence. I think it's time to close the case file and deliver the final verdict on our Viking mystery. The truth is, they were both. The great paradox of the Vikings is that they began as this force of pure destruction, but they became a force of creation. They raided kingdoms, yes, but in doing so, they also connected cultures, spurred trade, and ultimately became the founders of new nations and dynasties all across Europe. You see,
The Viking Age didn't end because they were defeated. It ended because they succeeded. They settled down, they converted to Christianity, and they integrated into the very kingdoms they had once terrorized. I mean, the Norman who conquered England in 1066 was a direct descendant of that Viking raider, Rollo. They didn't disappear, they just became the new establishment.
In the end, I think their greatest legacy was proving that what seems like a barrier, the cold open sea, was actually a highway to a new world. They remapped the globe through pure grit and ambition. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What barriers do we see as walls today that might actually be paths to something entirely new? Now that's the power of digging deeper than the myth. Thanks for watching. We hope to see you in the next episode.